Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm so excited to introduce you to Caitlin. I like to call her the breastfeeding guru. She thinks that's funny, but I think it's so spot on. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me again.
I just want you to share a little bit before we get started about your background in terms of breastfeeding.
Okay.
What got you to the space of being a consultant?
Okay. So I was a elementary school teacher before, and I taught for about 10 years. And then during the pregnancy with my first baby, I got super interested in women's health and reproductive health and felt like I needed to have a career change and help women in the prenatal and postnatal world. So I fell upon lactation consulting and then recertified and retrained and spent about 2.5 years getting to that point to write my international exam. And then I became an IBCLC and left teaching behind me. And I've been working in the private sector, so helping mothers and families one-on-one in their homes. And then I've also been working in the hospital setting as well, helping out with mothers who have just delivered and families in breastfeeding clinics. And I'm a mother to 3. And then I have 2 stepkids too. And I breastfed for I don't know, a lot of years, too many, too many years.
Well, I love hearing these stories because, like myself, you became a breastfeeding consultant because of your own personal journey. And I love stories that come out of that where we make a career change because of what we went through ourselves. And now you're supporting other families. So, congratulations. That's so amazing to hear that.
Yeah, it's been a great career change because there's that instant impact. You walk into that family who's desperate for your help, and then you leave rewarded that you helped them out. So it's a great feeling.
Good, good. And I know that breastfeeding is a hot topic because although we think it's natural, it's certainly not easy all the time. And I
Mm.
love that I've got you on my speed dial. And one of the things that I encourage all of our clients and any parents we talk to is if you're thinking about breastfeeding, no matter how long, reach out to a consultant. And Caitlin, you're amazing. And I know today's topic is going to be increasing your milk supply. So tell us a little bit about why we want to do that. And I guess
Okay.
3 or 4 suggestions on how we would do that.
Right. Well, I would say the 2 major reasons that I get called to somebody's house would be that they have a low milk supply and that they're having to supplement their baby or that they're in pain. Those are probably the 2 major calls that I get. So having a low milk supply can be a common issue, and it can go all the way back to that first 24 hours, what happened right after baby was born. And most mothers are capable of producing adequate amounts of milk for their babies. But, what happened in the early days can affect how your milk supply builds, or even, just a knowledge base. We did that little series about preparing to breastfeed. Well, that knowledge base of just in general, how does breastfeeding work and how do I protect my supply? Right. So definitely, a common reason that I get called.
Oh, good. Now, one of the things that I know we've had encountered with a lot of our clients is clients who or parents who have gone through some sort of breast surgery, reduction or an increase. So, is that something that can cause issues as well in terms of how much? Because we know they can still breastfeed, but does that impact the amount of milk that they may have? And can they change that? Can they make it better?
Right. Yeah. So breast surgeries are always one of my questions when I'm doing my medical history with mothers, breast surgeries, biopsies, nipple piercings, because we know that it can affect milk supply. Now, it doesn't mean that it will. It doesn't mean that because you had a breast reduction surgery, you will not be able to successfully breastfeed your baby or exclusively breastfeed your baby. But it's definitely something that you want to monitor and that you want to have follow up with someone about, because there is that risk that you may have a lower milk supply. Because when we have a surgery on our breast, we're severing different areas on our breast, and those areas can kind of regrow and reconnect, and those pathways can start working again, but maybe an area has been permanently affected, so maybe we're going to have a more difficult time getting more milk in that area. So yeah, there's definitely lots of strategies for if you do have a low milk supply and to boost your milk supply, even with a breast reduction surgery, or even if you only have one breast to feed off of. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's good to know. It's really good to know. We have a client right now that actually had a breast reduction, and she's got tons of milk, like way more milk than her little one even needs. So
Right.
I think that's important for families to know that if they've gone through some type of surgery or biopsy, that it's still possible. So
Right.
on that note, with increasing our milk supply, what are some tips that you might be giving families to help?
Right. So number one is stimulation at the breast, right? So we know that like the more the breast gets stimulated, the more the baby suckles at the breast, or the more you hand express, or the more you pump, then that sends a message to the brain to produce more milk. So always my first question is, how many times is baby going to the breast? Are they going to the breast every single feed? Are they only going to the breast 4 times a day? And if they're going to the breast 4 times a day, are you then pumping or hand expressing for those other 4 or 6 feeds that baby's having throughout the day? So number one is like stimulation of the breast. So always looking at your 24-hour cycle and saying, am I stimulating my breast as many times as baby is feeding? And if you got that box checked off, then that's good.
Good.
That's step number one,
Good. And
right?
that's a whole demand and supply theory, right? Where
Right.
our breasts don't just produce 6 ounces of milk off the get-go. It's about drawing that milk and stimulating to get that amount of milk to be made.
Exactly, exactly. And maybe your breast might produce that like on day 3 or 4 because you have this surge of hormones. But then as those hormones start to level out, then it really goes exclusively on demand. And then you might say, well, I was able to pump, 80 mLs at the beginning, and now I can only pump 30. And that's because your hormone levels have stabilized and you're not stimulating your breast frequently enough to keep up with that supply, right?
That's
So
right.
I usually
That's right.
say, if your baby is getting a bottle, then you should be pumping your breast, because that means baby didn't get enough at your breast and your breast needs some additional stimulation. That's if you're giving a bottle, because there's ways of like even supplementing your baby at the breast, which is really cool. When it works, it's really cool. So, you can get like an IBCLC to show you this, but it's like a little feeding tube that goes in one end of the bottle, and then it goes into baby's mouth while they're breastfeeding at your breast. So let's say you have low milk supply, maybe baby got tired after 10 minutes and you would normally give a bottle. You could give your bottle through this like feeding tube. And then because baby's getting like sucking this milk out of this tube at the breast, they're like stimulating your breast and they're acting as the pump. So they get their top up and they pump your breast all at the same time. So you don't even have to pull out that pump.
That's right. That's right.
And
That's a
then,
supplemental feeding nursing system that will
right.
be
Yeah.
recommended. And I love that because we've also had some parents who the baby, as much as we think our baby wants to be on the breast and hang out for hours, sometimes they don't. And if there's no milk there, there's no reason for them to stay there. So some parents struggle to get that baby on the breast because there's nothing there. So using that tube gives the
Right.
baby milk and reason to stay, which is going to help to stimulate and make all that change. So that's
Exactly.
great. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, can I
So
ask you how often? So let's say with a baby who is under a month old, how often would you want to see a mom's breast being utilized? Is there a
I would
magic number?
not really a magic number, but typically babies will feed a minimum of 8 times a day. They could feed like 15 times a day. They could feed 8 times a day, but generally they feed like, let's say on average 8 to 12 times a day. So, it's really important that you're going to be stimulating your breast those 8 times a day, right? To kind of match what baby's feeding. So if you have a baby that's not latching, or maybe you're exclusively pumping, right? That you're mimicking your baby. So when baby feeds, that you're going to pump, right? So that your supply mimics baby and your breasts know that, okay, yeah, every like 2 to 3 hours, I need to produce more milk, including the middle of the night, which is like one that like we like to try to avoid, like we want to sleep through the middle of the night. I don't blame any mom out there that wants to, but your prolactin levels, so this hormone that like produces milk, right? It helps with milk production. It actually like rises as you get sleep. So if we don't like stimulate our breast in the middle of the night, then we lose out when that hormone is really high. So it's actually probably the most important time to stimulate your breast is in the middle of the night, like around that 2, 3 a.m. marker, like probably the time you least want to wake up and least want to feed.
Well, I love that you touch, and this is one of the reasons that I love working with you is because I know that some people fear reaching out to IBCLCs because they think that it's a one way, like baby
Right.
at the breast, period. And I know that you and I talk about number one rule is to feed the baby. So I
Right.
love that you're giving options here to parents who want to breastfeed, but also might want to offer a bottle once a day, but you're giving them the information on how to do that correctly to not sabotage their breastfeeding journey. And that's what I love about you and why I'm constantly referring you to people is because some parents fear calling a breastfeeding
Right.
consultant for the fear that they're going to say, no soother, no bottle, no nothing, no SNS, like nothing, breast only. And that can scare people. So I love that you do give various options, but be realistic about it too. You're not going to tell them something that is going to sabotage their breastfeeding if that's what they want to do ultimately is breastfeed long term. So I
Right.
love that
Exactly.
about you.
Exactly. And if even their goal is to like pump long term, like who am I to say like, oh no, you should only breastfeed and make them feel guilty. And then they don't want to even pump anymore because they feel like
Exactly.
that not even worth it anymore. Right. Like let's like protect what we can protect and go with the goals of that family as an
Right.
individual.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing for families to know. If they are exclusively pumping and bottle feeding that breast milk, having a consultant like yourself show them how to do that to sustain that long term is also
Right.
valuable. So I
Yeah.
love that you are versatile in that and share that information with parents. Okay,
Right.
so
I
we've
even
got,
help. Oh, sorry. I've
no,
even
go for
helped
it.
like parents who are exclusively bottle feeding and they're not pumping and they're not breastfeeding, right? So like an IBCLC is like an infant feeding specialist, right? So we should be supporting families with their infant feeding goals, right? Whether that be exclusively formula feeding, exclusively bottle breast milk feeding, exclusively breastfeeding, or a combination of all, right? So that's our job is to help them with their infant feeding
I
goals.
love that. I love that. That's what I think I love, why I've really gravitated to you and supporting clients because there is no guilt or shame or any of that put with when you help. So I love that. Okay. So tip one is basically essentially demand and supply. Use your breasts as often as they need to continue that milk growth and creating that abundance. Okay. So that's good. So we know we have to use them regularly.
Right. And then another tip would be to be using our hands while we're breastfeeding or pumping. So there's a lot of research that says that like hands-on pumping or breast compressions can help produce more milk. So we know that like human touch and that baby even touching our breasts and beating our breasts with their fists actually help with the letdown reflex that, tells your brain to release the milk. So we can help stimulate that release of milk by using our own hands. So while we're pumping to be, massaging our breast or even like compressing and holding our breast and working both sides as we're pumping or as we're breastfeeding will help produce more milk. Like research says that you can yield up to 50% more milk by doing hands-on pumping, right?
Wow.
So yeah. And then we know that when we do a compression at the breast, so we like kind of squeeze and hold our breast, we kind of squirt out, or maybe not squirt, but drip out a little bit of milk. And as soon as that baby gets that, little bit of milk, it stimulates them to continue to work. And the more active your baby is at the breast, then the more stimulation is going to be happening at your breast, right? So, really using your hands to, and it doesn't have to be the whole time. If your baby's beautifully nursing, I don't want you like, tiring out your wrists and hands, right? But as your baby slows at the breast to really, work through some of those spots where you feel like there's still milk left over, like your breasts feel a bit more dense there, to put some back pressure behind there, or to do those compressions where you're kind of squeezing out a little bit of milk to baby keep them active. So yeah,
That's
using
good.
your hands-on pumping would be a big hands-on pumping and hands-on breastfeeding would really help supply.
That's great. And I find too that if baby is falling asleep, sometimes we're inclined to just take the baby off the breast And this
Yes.
is a great way to remind them, hey, there's still more here when you're hand expressing. And then often after a little burp, they're back on and at it again. So that's a great tip.
Right.
Any others?
Yes. So like a lot of people will talk about, lactation cookies and herbal supplements or domperidone, which is like a prescription that you can get. So there are a whole like, market, I guess, a marketing experience for herbs and stuff like that can help boost milk supply. And they can be very beneficial to helping boost milk supply if you're doing A and B first, right? Like you're not going to get more milk by taking these supplements, but not stimulating your breasts anymore, right? So you always got to go
Absolutely.
back to, stimulation first. And then these herbs can help boost milk supply, but it's always important that you check with like your naturopath or your IBCLC or your doctor, because even some herbs can like interact with medications that we're on or certain medical conditions that we have, or certain herbs may work better for you than they work for me. And like going to a naturopath or an IBCLC, and sometimes your doctors will know too, but they can help you sort out maybe which one is right for you, right? So, because you don't want to
Absolutely.
be taking thyroid medications and then taking a herb that's going to affect your thyroid levels, right? So we want to really like just be careful with those. And then these products cost money, right? So
Absolutely.
always
I
best,
guess they're probably more of a last resort, really. If you're doing
they
all
are
those things and it's not
right,
quite there, then maybe those are the things that you would introduce is the DOM
right,
and the
exactly.
tinctures and things.
Yeah.
Another big one, tell us a little bit about calories and water.
Oh yeah, good one. That's also important. And sleep.
Well, some people don't think about it. When new mom, eating and
Yeah,
drinking is the last thing on their mind. They forget
right,
about taking care of themselves. And I know that
right.
impacts them as well.
Right. So yeah, I would like totally neglected that part. But yeah, self-care is super important in milk production. So, keeping yourself well hydrated and well fed. And it's hard to feed ourselves when we're spending like, minimum 8 hours a day nursing baby. Forget about diaper changes, soothing baby, putting baby back to sleep, all those things, doing the laundry for baby. So that time gets consumed very quickly. So usually with families, I say like, get somebody to bring you the meal. So while you're feeding baby, your meal is sitting right beside you. And it's not just like, a steak and a salad. It's like everything cut up into baby sizes so that you
That's
can,
smart.
yeah, so that you can eat it very easily. Right. And then having like, if you consume nuts and seeds and dried fruits, like those are so good. I like a great way of getting calories very quickly. And it's just in a handful that you can quickly kind of chew on as you're feeding your baby. Smoothies as well are a great idea for keeping well hydrated and well fed. I see lots of moms that have these giant water bottles and it kind of just follows them to whatever room they go to.
Absolutely. Well, that's something we suggest as well to
Yeah.
our parents is to have a little basket wherever your breastfeeding stations are with some snacks and some water, because you and I both know how we finally sit in the chair. We spent so much time getting that baby to latch. They've sucked on, and now we don't want to move. And now
Right.
we remember, I haven't eaten today. I
Right.
haven't drank anything today. And it's
Yes.
all the way over there. We're not moving. So even
Right.
if there's someone that, if they're not home with someone, having that basket of
Right.
some treats and things like that will help. So that's a great tip with the nuts and the water too.
Yeah. And then sleep. Like I find that, I experienced this as a mom, just having that anxiety about your baby when they first come into the world that, now you have to keep this baby alive. Right. And there's that fear that, if you're not watching your baby like 24/7, that something might happen. Right. And then we can lose our sleep. And, I spoke about the prolactin levels rising when we get sleep. So it is so important that we get sleep. Now, I'm not saying an 8-hour stretch of sleep, but that you're getting those little chunks of sleep, an hour and a half, 20 minutes, 45 minutes, 3 hours, like those little chunks of sleep are so important. So, if you're finding it really difficult to sleep at night and that you're like, very aware of your baby at night, maybe during the day saying to your partner or your mother or your best friend, can you just watch the baby while I go have a nap? Like, I'll feel confident that you're awake and you're watching the baby. Or sometimes even it's just where the bassinet is in the room. Sometimes where you've put the bassinet just feels too far. And it feels like, even though it's only 3 feet away, that baby feels too far away. And then sometimes just putting the bassinet right up against the bed eases you and allows you to get a little bit of sleep as well.
That's great. Those are some great tips. I think they're so important. And I'm honored that you're part of our village at Babies, because you have helped so many of our families and our parents that have been breastfeeding. And it's great to have you. So, and that's why I started this podcast and these videos, to show everyone that it really does take a village. It's important. And if you're doing it by yourself, you're doing it wrong. You need people doing this with you to support you in your journey. So thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining and giving us these great tips. For those of you listening and watching, I will put the information in the show notes on how you can reach out to Caitlin. So if you're looking for some support and want some more tips, because I'm sure she's got tons in her toolkit, we will put that in the show notes for you. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Caitlin, for joining in.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.